Welcome back, everyone. Spring and summer is a time for new growth and taking bold action together. So we hope these stories will inspire you to live boldly, take wise chances, and with our friends and family make a difference together. Today we're going to be reading The American Story, 100 True Tales from American History by Jennifer Armstrong and illustrated by Roger Roth. So lean in with the spirit of adventure, grab a friend, and let's enjoy the story together. 1899, extra, read all about it. The war in Cuba was a real payday for the American newspapers. William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal and Joseph Pulitzer's New York World, which, as we know from the stories about the trip around the world, she worked there for a time, outdid each other with sensational headlines, and circulation shot through the roof. Every day, the newsboys who sold most of the city's papers on the streets gathered outside the press rooms, playing games and shooting the breeze until the edition was ready. Then they bought the sheets wholesale and spread out like a miniature army across the city, crying, "Read all about it! Gretcher paper!" Even newsboys as young as 7 or 8 could make a good wage buying the papers for half a cent and selling them for a penny. It was good return on investment as long as they sold all the papers they bought. The news offices wouldn't buy back unsold papers, so a boy had to be sure ahead of time how many he could sell or he'd be out of luck. Once the war was over, those circulation dropped off and the publishers watched their profits sink. Hearst and Pulitzer didn't think their customers would be willing to pay more for the papers on the street. So in July of '99, they decided to recoup their losses by charging the newsies more. Instead of 50 cents for 100 papers, the boys would have to pay 60 cents. That's a whopping 20% price hike that had to come out of the newsies' meager pockets. We're talking about little boys here. The boys were outraged. If 2 millionaires like Hearst and Pulitzer couldn't afford to see their profits sink, how could the kids manage it? Half the boys had families at home who depended entirely on their income, and the other half were homeless street kids who slept in barns, doorways, or saloons. Young they might be, poor they might be, but they spent a lot of time reading the newspapers they sold, and they knew all about organizing unions and striking for better wages. So the newsies went on strike. Oh my goodness, look at you. You good down there? There you are. Help us in our struggle to get fair play by not buying the Journal or the World, they wrote on signs around the city. Our cause is just, and we will fight for our rights. The other newspapers that hadn't raised their prices, the New York Times, the Sun, the Brooklyn Eagle, all covered the newsboy strike in gleeful detail, crowing over Hearst's and Pulitzer's losses. Pedestrians gave the boys spare change and cheerfully bought other papers instead of the World or Journal. In their offices, the newspaper bosses were stumped. Okay. Kids? How could kids bring 2 giant newspaper empires to a grinding halt? It was ridiculous. The leaders of the strike were just street urchins with names like Kid Blink, Racetrack Higgins, Barney Peanuts, and Crutchy Morris. But by July 21st, Pulitzer's advisors were warning them that the newsboy strike has grown into a menacing affair. It is proving a serious problem. Practically all the boys in New York and adjacent towns have quit selling. Stick like glue, Kid Blink told 5,000 newsies at a meeting on July 24th. Never give in. Hold out, my gallant kids, said Spot Conlon from Brooklyn. And tomorrow I myself, at the head of 3,000 noble hearts from Brooklyn, will be over here to help yous win your noble scrap for freedom and fair play. He promised he'd lead his gang of newsboys across the Brooklyn Bridge in a show of support. The boys cheered and streamed into the streets, howling with excitement. If any strike breakers were outselling the World or the Journal, they'd have to answer to the newsies. By the second week of the strike, Pulitzer's losses had been colossal. The print run had been cut back to a third of its pre-strike size, and advertisers were pulling out. The people seemed to be against us, the staff informed him. They are encouraging the boys and tipping them, and where they are not doing this, they are refraining from buying papers for fear of having them snatched from their hands. Pulitzer and Hearst were nearly speechless with indignation. Lousy snot-nosed brats! How dare they defy 2 of the most powerful men in New York City? But the strike was killing the 2 newspapers. The bosses had no choice but to negotiate. They offered a compromise. The wholesale price would stay at 60 cents per 100 papers, but they would now buy back any unsold sheets. That way the boys wouldn't be out of pocket if they misjudged on a slow news day. World went out into the streets, and the newsies flocked to the offices of the World and the Journal again. It wasn't a complete victory, but they had shown the country that even kids could fight for fair treatment as long as they stuck together like glue. And this may sound familiar if you're into, Broadway. The Newsies. Well, there was a movie too. But anyway, that's about this situation. And there's a note. Labor unions were being formed all over the world at this time, with workers joining together to speak with one voice for their rights. Children were part of the labor force in factories, farms, mills, mines, and on the streets until 1938, when laws were passed to prevent the exploitation of children. Or solstices.